All right, going back to the top story we are tracking here on DD India NewsHour, India and the US signed a 10-year Defence Framework Pact. Joining us for more on this developing story is Ambassador Gurjit Singh. Ambassador Singh is a former Indian envoy to Germany, Indonesia and Ethiopia. Ambassador Singh, welcome to DD India NewsHour. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the third iteration of the India-US Defence Framework Pact between 2005, 2015 and now in 2025. What will this pact entail?
Thank you. So I think this pact entails a framework under which for the next decade, India-US defense partnership will grow. So this takes all the old pacts and adds momentum and modernity to it. It gives you a unified view of defense production, intelligence sharing, maritime security, and strategic convergence as a whole. So I think there are many parts to it, and it is like an omnibus framework which will make India, earlier we used to say India is a major non-NATO ally. I think now we are a major defense partner. Right. I think that is most important. This is going beyond what Defense Minister signed last month, I think, in Australia, similar agreement. And I think in August, when PM had visited Japan, there was also an omnibus agreement like this. So I think this basically has a reflection on India's strategic role in the Indo-Pacific to maintain the free and open Indo-Pacific and to have joint production, joint assessment, joint strategies, and interoperability among India and the United States in this case.
Ambassador Singh, will this pact make it easier for India to access critical technology from the US? And what kind of transfer of technology would India be looking for?
So the critical technologies are part of the ICET partnership. And I think that is where they are looking at what are called critical technologies. Nowadays, critical technologies refer to critical minerals, rare earths, magnets, and semiconductors and related things. But you're right, within the defense segment, there are also many critical technologies like the GE 404 engines and other matters. Now, here what we find so far is that the Americans, while being keen that India diversify its defense procurement from Russia, they are very slow on joint production and transfer of technology. They are ready to provide you off-the-shelf equipment, but when it comes down to joint production in India, there is almost none. And we had this agreement to have GE 404 engines for Tejas Mark 1, I think. And those also have been very slow, though I'm told some have started coming now. So there is a bit of a gap between what we read out of such an agreement and what the Americans are ready to do.
Ambassador, the US Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, says India is a priority country for the US in defense cooperation. The US also says it is working closely with India to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. And what are India's stakes really in the Indo-Pacific?
So this is very interesting. Peter Hegseth, the Secretary of War, today had two meetings on the sidelines of the ADMM+. One was with Raksha Mantri and the other one was with the Chinese Defense Minister. And in both those meetings, he has said things which President Trump has not been saying. In fact, President Trump with Xi Jinping in Korea did not cover free and open Indo-Pacific, Taiwan, South China Sea, East China Sea, and the works, all of which Pete Hegseth has today discussed with the Chinese foreign minister. And with India, he has said all these nice things, which we have missed in the Trump narrative, which has so boldly gone on the trade side. So I think when you talk to and hear Pete Hegseth, you see a kind of a semblance of order in the rather disorderly state that Indo-US relations presently find themselves in. India's role in the Indo-Pacific, irrespective of what the United States says, I think India and Japan are the two pillars or two sides of the Indo-Pacific to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific so that regional powers seeking hegemony do not upset our trade, commerce, and free navigation.
Ambassador, I'll come to the trade bit in just a bit, but staying with the Indo-Pacific for now. For the US, the Indo-Pacific region ends at India's western coast. But India sees the Horn of Africa and the southern Indian Ocean also as part of the Indo-Pacific region. Why this difference in New Delhi's and Washington, D.C.'s Indo-Pacific construct?
So India, Japan, and France are three of the countries with an Indo-Pacific policy, which goes from the Pacific to the eastern coast of Africa.
Right.
The United States is hampered by bureaucracy. Their Indo-Pacific command stops in the Bay of Bengal, whereas the central command starts with the Arabian Sea and goes beyond. So it is bureaucracy which is preventing them, but that does not mean that the central command is not undertaking, let's say, anti-piracy or other actions in the Gulf and in the Western Indian Ocean. So I think it is more semantics rather than simply areas of responsibility.
All right, and talking a bit more at length about the Indo-Pacific, Ambassador, India and the US are members of the Quad. Indications are that the Quad summit might not take place as planned this year in India. Is the US still interested in the Quad as a force for common good?
So it is evident from the statements made by Peter Hegseth today that he is interested in a free and open Indo-Pacific, which is what the Quad is for. But as I said, President Trump has not been saying this. And Mark Rubio, Secretary of State, he has been saying this. In fact, he has held 2 Quad foreign ministerial meetings ever since the Trump inauguration. So there is a dichotomy in the way different levels of the United States government have been dealing with the Quad. But if you see Prime Minister Takeichi's phone call to Prime Minister Modi, in that it is very much there. And if you see Australian Prime Minister Albanese, when he was in the EAS meetings, his statements all clearly refer to the Quad. So certainly India, Japan, Australia at all levels are interested in the Quad. And this year, India, Japan, India, Australia have both upgraded their defense agreements to make them more cohesive and cogent.
Fair enough. And finally, Ambassador Singh, can India and the US insulate defense cooperation from the dissonance or turbulence in other aspects of the relationship, such as trade? Do you think the US slapping 50% tariff on Indian goods will have a cascading effect on ties?
So if it was purely a trade issue, my answer would be yes. But the issue with the United States right now is that they have muddied the trade relationship by imposing sanctions on India for buying Russian oil. That is not a trade issue. That's a strategic issue. Similarly, the manner in which they have cozied up to Pakistan after the attacks in Pahalgam and Operation Sindoor is also nothing to do with trade. It's a strategic option that they have exercised. So the trade issue and the additional tariffs and sanctions on India are muddied by American understanding of their strategic options for the present. So till those are remedied, agreements like we signed today will have a lesser coherence than they would if there was a total agreement on strategic issues. But a simple thing, I think America should see South Asia through an Indian prism. But they are very well doing what they want, often at loggerheads with what the Indian policy is. So there is a dissonance between India and the United States on Russia, on China, on the neighborhood. So on that, with so much dissonance, you expect coherence in the Indo-Pacific. I think that is stretching it a bit.
All right, we'll leave it there. Ambassador Singh, pleasure as always to talk to you. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.